Hello and welcome to Media Monitor, the show that monitors and evaluates the world of news media both here at home and across the globe. My name is Peter Ndoro and this is what's coming up on the program today. Now, Parliament's Portfolio Committee on Communications has given the SABC's turnaround strategy the go-ahead, and apart from dealing with governance issues, regulatory constraints and operational strategies, the SABC's board has been looking at ways to reduce the corporation's huge payroll costs through interventions which could include retrenchments. And we'll be asking the question, is the SABC on the right track? Also, how was President Cyril Ramaphosa's first address at the United Nations General Assembly in New York as head of state covered in the South African media as well as in the US? His mission to the UN was to present South Africa's case as a destination of choice for investors and outline the country's domestic and foreign policy goals and priorities. And we'll be looking at all of that in quite a bit of detail on the program. But first, if you're wondering what you're waking up to in terms of newspapers, let's take a look at those headline stories. Starting with the Sunday Times, and that's leading with a story about how cabinet ministers will pay just 1,200 Rand a month to live in lavishly renovated multi-million Rand apartments in Cape Town, which experts have criticized as wasteful and a slap in the face for taxpayers that are bucking under fuel price hikes and spiraling costs of living. The City Press, well, that's running with that horrific Dross rape story and how staffers and witnesses at the franchise have painted a harrowing picture of how Nicholas Nino tried to flush his and a 6-year-old girl's bloodied clothes down a toilet after he allegedly raped her. The Sunday Independent this morning is leading with a story about how South African students are going red. Yeah, that's according to the latest university elections, where the EFF has defeated the ANC-aligned SA Students' Congress, SASCO, at the Durban University of Zululand and Mangosuthu University of Technology. The Sunday Tribune's front page is also leading with this story about how more and more South African students are voting for Julius Malema's EFF party. And that's according, as we've just seen in the other paper, according to the university election process where EFF defeated SASCO at the Durban University of Zululand and Mangosuthu University of Technology. Well, the Weekend Argus, that's carrying a story about how Metro Rail is on the verge of collapse as arson attacks continue unabated and police admit they are unable to secure the transport service. Swaziland's Sunday Observer's front page reports on the death of former ICT Minister Dumisani Nhlangamandla. And going to West Africa, the Nigeria's Sunday Trust is running with a story about how the joint task force searching for the former chief administration at the Nigerian Army headquarters, Major General Muhammad Idris Ali Kali, yesterday recovered his vehicle at an old mining pond in Lafendeng Du district of Plateau's Jos South local government area. All right, so those are your front pages of your Sunday papers, and we'll look at some of those stories in our newspaper review a little bit later on. But first, a story that's close to our hearts, particularly here at the SABC. The South African Broadcasting Corporation's board has presented a detailed turnaround strategy to Parliament's Portfolio Committee on Communications this past week. Now, the plan includes dealing with governance issues, regulatory constraints, and the implementation of various operational strategies. The SABC has confirmed that it plans to cut its 3.1 billion Rand salary bill, plans which may include retrenchments. Parliament has given the broadcaster's strategy the go-ahead, though. SABC board chairperson Bongamusa Magatini outlined some of the cost drivers.
In 2009, one of the treasury conditions of the government guarantee was that the SABC must reduce employee costs in order to be sustainable. Reality is, when you run a business, there's two things you manage really. It's revenue and cost. You've got to manage your cost and make sure that your revenue far exceeds your cost. Therefore, in 2018, employee cost is still the biggest cost driver at the SABC and continue to be out of step as a percentage of revenue.
Right, now for a discussion, we're now joined by SABC Chief Financial Officer Yolandi Vodmiljoen, who's in our Pretoria studios, and we also have the Chief Executive at the Association for International Broadcasting, Simon Spanswick, who joins us via Skype in Doha. And a little bit later on, we'll be chatting to Makosini Nkosi, who's an independent media consultant. But let's start in Pretoria with our CFO. Yolandi, thanks very much for joining us and welcome to the program. You've been in the job 3 months, so you've had a chance to take a look at the books and some of the challenges that we've been facing. And just how big a problem is our payroll bill?
Good morning, Peter. Thank you for allowing me an opportunity to represent the SABC here today. Yeah, the payroll as at 42% of our total cost base certainly is significant, and therefore it requires a plan of action. But by the same token, there are a number of other cost drivers as well, and all of these will be receiving attention. And if you then look at revenue, yes, our revenue is not what it should be. The funding model is not appropriate, and therefore we also are looking at plans to address that.
All right, we'll talk about the funding model just now. I was just wondering, you said 42% of the cost base. Is there a norm in terms of organizations of this size and of this nature of what it should be as a percentage of cost?
So if you look at, of the 42%, about 35% is the permanent payroll specifically. And indications are that when revenue was not a problem about 4 or 5 years ago, that percentage should be nearer to 26-27%. So clearly there is room to make some changes going forward.
All right, and then on the revenue side, the SABC functions both as a self-earning entity through advertising, and then on the other, it gets grants from government, but also these TV licenses. Is this something that we need to look at again to make the organization more sustainable on the revenue side?
Yes, definitely. So if you look at the cost of our mandate, it is estimated to be around 2 billion rand. That is a combination of events of national interest, the 22 sporting codes that are deemed sports of national interest, and special events, as well as some educational programs that we are required to execute in terms of our license conditions. Now, the funding we receive for that amounts to approximately 200 million rand from a government grant for the education, etc. And then for the TV licenses, there's about 1 billion rand generated per annum. So clearly there's a gap there. Now, we know that the cost of sport specifically has escalated tremendously in the last few years. So there, the gap alone is about 500 to 600 million rand per annum. And therefore, in consultation with the stakeholders affected with that specific theme, we are working on ways to address that going forward. Unfortunately, it is not an overnight solution. These things will take time. And if you then talk about TV licenses, lots of room to improve it. Anything from a potential increase later in this year, having had no increases in 5 years. But you must present content that's attractive to be able to draw your audiences back, noting that there's so many options these days.
All right. Let's bring Simon Spanswick into the conversation. He's the president of the Association for International Broadcasting. Simon, as someone who sits on top of a global organization such as the AIB, I wonder if the public funding model has changed over the years. TV licenses is something that we've known for many, many, many years, decades even. In 2018, in a world where new media is on the up, is TV licensing and that kind of model still relevant? Hello, Simon, can you hear me? Hello, Simon. All right. We're going to try and get Simon on the phone again. He's struggling to hear us. But Yolandi, TV licenses. So one of the challenges, and I was looking at your financial statements, not this current year, but the year before, and the impairment or the writing off of those that didn't pay. Had they paid, then the SABC would have been in a positive financial position. So what does that tell us?
Well, I think it is the outcome of a number of factors that comes together. Everything from legislation that's not aligned with the practices today, or that would make us competitive as far as this is concerned. The fact that there is the culture of non-payment, the reputation of the organization which has suffered in recent years. And then you add to all of that, that content is not attractive. But it starts with us starting to engage with our TV license holders to be able to create this culture of a willingness to pay, but because we can be trusted, the organization has integrity and the content is attractive. Of course, in parallel, we are then looking at how the regulation can be enhanced to support the concept of TV licenses as we have it today, which would include potentially looking at a fee of sorts on more than just a TV set today. But ultimately, we must start engaging more actively with our audience, but we must give them attractive content.
There's a bit of confusion with some viewers who say that, look, if I've got a DSTV package which includes the SABC, surely if I'm paying for DSTV, why should I have to pay a TV license as well?
Yeah, that could be confusion. But we do also have 18 radio stations, and we do present content that speaks to many more people than just that specific market element that watches DSTV. As it is, we are engaging with the DSTVs of this world to be able to have a better sense of if a subscriber is at DSTV, then it's assumed that they have a TV or a desktop, a set-top box or a decoder of sorts. So by getting access to those kind of databases in consultation with DSTV, one hopes that we will also be able to close those leakages, if you can put it that way, going forward.
All right. Right now, I can access quite a bit of content online. So I don't have a TV, but I've got a computer. You still want me to pay a TV license for watching you on YouTube?
Well, you do get a lot of value for money for what we do present. And on YouTube today is only, I think, some of our series and the news channel, which is actually a highly watched, from what I believe, one of the top channels in Africa to watch. But it's the right thing to do as a South African, because we are the SABC is there to enhance the South African public's views, portray the talent we have, develop the industry, and to make South Africa, to brand South Africa almost in a way, if I can put it like that. And therefore, I think each of us as South African citizens have a duty to contribute.
All right. Okay. So going forward, are these retrenchments going to happen, or are you still trying to stave them off?
We are going to do everything in our power through the process to minimize it as much as possible, if not stave it off completely. There are a host of steps and initiatives that will be consulted with the unions as the process unfolds in the next 2 or 3 months, and surely when we get to the end, it will really be the bare minimum if it's within our power.
All right, Yolandi, we're going to leave it there. Thanks very much indeed for sharing your thoughts with us on behalf of the SABC. Thank you so much. That was Yolandi van Biljoen, who's the CFO for the SABC. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, Makosini Nkosi gets a bite at this one.
Register to participate in the inaugural Intra-African Trade Fair, IATF, taking place from 11 to 17 December 2018 in Cairo, Egypt. Over 70,000 visitors, buyers and sellers, 1,000 exhibitors, all African Union member states are expected, and $25 billion offered to finance trade deals concluded at the fair. Catch our early registration discount on offer till 30 September. Visit www.intraafricantradefair.com. IATF, transforming Africa.
Hey, amakazi asibulele since kusilele asifatimbaula like yabanda le goli, and then sesize decide ukuthi sivele sibase umlilo khona sokhona nokufudumala kusebenzeki na kahle.
Police killers are not coming from the sky. They are actually coming from the communities where we are. So it cannot be correct.
We regret what has happened because the strike affects everyone. So is electricity. Electricity also affects everyone. It's a community problem.
We are owing ESCO. Currently, we could not reconcile the bill, what they bill us, with theirs. We could not agree.
Welcome back. You're still watching Media Monitor. Now, we continue with our discussion about the SABC's turnaround strategy, which Parliament approved this past Tuesday. And helping us unpack and give us another view is Makosini Nkosi, who's an independent media consultant. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, so you used to work here. You know what it's like and some of the challenges that an organization like this faces. Yeah. And you've also been on social media giving your opinion.
Yes.
What's your take on this whole story?
Look, I don't know if the SABC realizes that it is the biggest broadcaster in the country, not only by the numbers of people it employs, but the properties that it has. I mean, 8 of the top 10 radio stations in South Africa, the biggest by numbers, are owned by the SABC. The SABC has SABC One, which is a huge platform. I think that, you know, in terms of the properties that it has and the advertising that it gathers, the SABC should be cash flush. The problem with the SABC is that it's not run like a business. It's not, there is a lack of innovation in this place. And innovation is a driver of growth. I mean, if you look at, let me make an example with banks, for example. Around the early 2000s, ABSA was the biggest bank and the fastest growing because it was innovating. And now you see that it is FNB because FNB is innovating with e-wallet and all those things. So I'm looking at the SABC and I'm thinking that what content, or rather, what is it that the SABC is doing to make sure that it can sell its content, one, to Africa, and also to the African diaspora? People are interested in what is happening in Africa. We import a lot of American culture into South Africa, and there's nothing stopping South Africa from exporting its culture to other places in the world. You can look at the British Broadcasting Corporation, for example. Many people, if you ask them what is your favorite motoring show, they'll tell you that it's Top Gear. That's produced by the BBC and it syndicates it to other places. I do not know if the SABC does the same thing, but to say that because you are facing some financial difficulties and one of the things that you think about is laying off workers who had no contribution to the problems that the SABC is facing. All the problems that the SABC is facing now have got to do with management and very little to do with
So your
employees.
solution, are you saying keep the staff, but just find ways to make more money?
Find ways of, you know, if you have a big family and you experience a reduction in your income, you don't chase away family members. You find ways of increasing your income. I don't think that the SABC has done enough to leverage the strength that it has in the broadcast.
Right, so
you have world-class facilities here that you know you can allow other people to use. And
let me play devil's advocate a little bit here and say, what if that the SABC is overstaffed? In other words, there are some people that are not really gainfully employed but are drawing a salary. What do you do?
Look, I'm saying the first thing that you have to look at is how do you increase your revenue. Because, your CFO just said now that when the SABC was making money, the staff that you had could be accommodated. So the problem is not, as it were, in my view, strictly that you have a huge salary budget. It is that you have experienced a reduction of income, which is due to mismanagement at any rate and lack of leadership that we experienced in the past few years. I'm saying find ways of getting content out and receiving money, foreign exchange, but also you have content producers. The SABC insists on paying content producers. If you look at the norm in other places, like in the United States, for instance, there is a sharing of revenue with content producers. So you can say to the guy, come here, give us content. You're an entrepreneur. If your content is good, we will get in the numbers of people who are going to be watching, and we'll be getting advertising. So we can split advertising. Now, if I am a content producer and you give me a platform like that, I can give you content, and if I need money to get started, I can go to the bank, and the SABC can cover production costs. But to insist that you get big personalities which demand big payments, and you don't have the money to pay them. So you have to find a way of how you share the risk with them.
Do we not need to look at the whole funding model completely? I mean, you know, the BBC, it's TV licenses domestically, but they don't have any advertising on their platforms, and that's left to the private media. Could we look at a situation where, because the mandate is different for the public broadcaster to commercial stations, focus on public broadcasting, just get a budget vote from Parliament, one amount, forget TV licenses, forget advertising revenue, and be a public broadcaster?
Look, I think that the model that we have of having a mix of public broadcasting and commercial is a viable one, right? And I think that, where you rely solely on government for funding, you run the risk of being the mouthpiece of government, which is what we would want to steer clear from. I think what we need to do is to give, and your CFO spoke to this, that you need to give your viewers and your listeners content that they want. To be honest with you, I don't think the SABC has done a lot of research into what people want. You know, as a political consultant, when I run an election, I first want to know what the voters want. What are their issues? What are their aspirations? What are they unhappy about? And I craft my messages to speak to those things, and then you get your candidate elected. Now, if you have a media company like the SABC, you have to know what content the people want. What are the issues that they are concerned about? Once you speak to the issues that they are interested in, they will watch, they will bring in the numbers, advertising will come in, and you'll be able to sustain yourself. But if you have programming that doesn't speak to the people, that people aren't interested in, then you'll see what is happening all over the country. Even in informal settlements, you see DSTV dishes, because people are not getting the content that they want from the SABC. So it's a matter of content. And I think the SABC has dropped the ball. If you can see, most of the channels that people watch, like channel like Mzansi Magic and all that, this was traditionally the SABC territory. And the SABC, I mean, due to the problems that it has had, it let MultiChoice, capitalize on that. But also, here's an interesting bit, Peter. MultiChoice itself is in decline. Now, I want to know, what is the SABC's plan to get those viewers from MultiChoice?
So, TV licenses, we're being e-told here. They're not paying. And we understand some of the emotion around it. Is there a way to fix it and to restore the culture of paying TV licenses?
Let me tell you, the best days of TV license collection are behind us. And I think the SABC must make peace with that. The SABC finds itself in a similar situation with, Sanral, that you have got all these gantries and people are not paying. And that's because there is no carrot and a stick. There's no carrot. What is it that entices people to pay? And there's no stick, that if they don't pay, what do you do? But also, we are in a fast digitizing world. Like I'm saying, the best days of TV license collection are behind us. And I think the SABC now needs to be innovative, and I think it needs to think outside the box and see what is it that we can do to increase our revenue. But having said that, if TV license collection remains a central part of the SABC. You've got to find a way of how you entice people to pay. How do you make people stand up and say, I'm going to pay my TV license? And what do you do if they do not pay? But to have, you know, people called every day on the phone by TV license collectors, and if you don't pay, nothing happens. Why should people bother? That's the thinking, unfortunately, as far as people are concerned.
All right. So apart from the staff costs, are you happy with what you've heard in terms of the turnaround strategy from the SABC?
I think it doesn't go far enough. I think it is not ambitious enough. I mean, Peter, you know this perhaps better than I do. Some of the fastest growing economies in the world are in Africa. I mean, is the SABC seeing Africa as a market?
Okay, all right. So with you, innovation, creativity is what's required.
Absolutely.
All right.
Thinking outside the box. Yeah.
Okay, all right. We'll pause there for a moment. We'll take another quick break, and when we come back, we'll start looking at other stories in the frame.
We are saying similarly here, in a process which is intended to be impartial and independent, he should similarly recuse himself.
One can build conspiracies, and the fewer facts you have, the more easy it is to build conspiracies. And I suggest to you that when you're suggesting that there is some conspiracy about the witnesses were called, you might not have been aware of the facts that I've outlined to you.
Zimbabwe belongs to all Zimbabweans from all the four corners of Zimbabwe.
What a time! 1:54.26, another meeting record. She made it look effortless. Once again, Caster Semenya, no pacemaker required.
Where am I going to sleep now? What about my kids?
There is bribe involved because we are not aware that they will come today.
People are being evicted about 2 months ago in May. We served the first court order. This is private property.
They came to us with a truck that has no water.
How do we build these checks in a way that we don't have a fire spread when we have a fire incident?
Welcome back. You're watching Media Monitor. Now, President Cyril Ramaphosa has delivered his first address at the 73rd session of the United Nations General Assembly in New York this past week. And his mission to the UN was to present South Africa's case as a destination of choice for investors and outline the country's domestic and foreign policy goals and priorities. And these include land reform, of course, that program which is aimed at fostering greater stability, inclusiveness and transformation within the economy. Well, let's take a look at this story that was filed by our US correspondent, Sherwin Bryce-Pease.
He arrived early Sunday morning for his first visit to the United States as head of state.
Welcome to New York, Mr. President. Good to see you, sir.
See you. Thank you.
With a twofold agenda: to position the country as a strong advocate for multilateralism ahead of its Security Council term next year, and to explain the country's new economic and political posture under his administration.
I found that all the audiences that we interacted with on the land question fully understand the rationale. They understood where we are coming from, and they fully also understood the process that we are involved in, and we're quite satisfied that we are going to handle this matter in terms of our constitution, in terms of the rule of law, and that we are not going to allow a situation where there is a land grabs and where we descend into mayhem.
He unveiled this Nelson Mandela statue and gifted it to the United Nations, addressed the Peace Summit that ushered in a Mandela Decade of Peace starting in 2019, and addressed the General Assembly.
It is within our hands, as the leaders assembled here today, to forge a more representative, equal and fair United Nations that is empowered and equipped to lead the struggle to end poverty, unemployment and inequality in the world.
He attended a roundtable with CEOs of major US companies flanked by his economics team and took questions from dozens of business leaders in an informal seminar to gauge their interests and address their concerns. And stopped by the Bloomberg Global Business Forum focused on trade.
Why should I invest in South Africa right now? What do you say? Last word.
Well, I would say that what we're seeking to do on the land question is to manage risk, to minimize the risk, but at the same time, we're doing a whole lot of other things. We're working on policy issues to ensure that there's policy certainty and consistency. And this we've arrived at after talking to the business sector, to the unions, and we all agree that if we address this, we will begin to see the investment community looking at South Africa in a different way.
He also addressed a high-level meeting at the UN on tuberculosis and urged world leaders to do more.
We would like to see the declaration emanating from this high-level meeting embracing the key asks and setting in motion the bold response needed to end the global tuberculosis epidemic.
The president, flying commercial, is expected back in South Africa early Friday. Sherwin Bryceby's SABC News, New York.
Right, now to discuss this trip and this mission, I'm now joined in studio by SABC foreign correspondent, foreign editor, Sophie Mkwena. Thanks very much for joining us. Welcome to the program.
Morning, Peter.
And Makosini, we've said hello to you already. And we're also joined by CNN Africa international correspondent, David Mackenzie. David, thanks very much for joining us.
Good morning, Peter.
Welcome.
Thank you.
All right, let me start with you, Sophie. Yesterday I heard the Foreign Affairs Minister, Public International Relations, Lindiwe Sisulu, say that overall she felt that Mission South Africa to the UN was a huge success. Your take, you were there?
They have reasons to celebrate. On arrival, the president had a meeting with the director, UN Women, Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka, who in this case is also seen as an ambassador for South Africa. And I guess lobbying took place there to ensure that perhaps she can also influence the officials at the UN to support Team South Africa. And indeed, during the unveiling of Mandela statue, you saw a number of UN officials, including some politicians, attending the unveiling. And also the Secretary General was there of the UN, Antonio Guterres. And then the next thing was President Ramaphosa was supposed to speak on Wednesday, but he was able to be moved to Tuesday, which was a prime slot in a sense, because that's where you have your main countries speaking on the first day. And secondly, it was a prime spot in terms of time as well, because it was around 2 o'clock, I think, US time, and here home, it was in the evening when everybody's watching television. So we're able to take him live, and even the international networks, they were able to tap into his speech, and that was a success in that many people did cover his speech, different newspapers and broadcasters. The last issue is around him meeting business. The Bloomberg gathering, he was there. He was able to share his thoughts in terms of the economic challenges the country is facing, perhaps responding to certain questions like the land question, the issue of the independence of the Reserve Bank, and perhaps the future of the country. And then 2 engagements the same day with other small group of high influential investors in the US behind closed doors. And then secondly, a broader audience with all the investors, generally even small businesses in the US, to talk about the country. And I think he tried his level best. This was his first appearance at the United Nations, and he was well received. And everywhere the dinner, you see Secretary General ensuring that he's there. I mean, the dinner on Wednesday night, the Secretary General was there to support South Africa. And then lunchtime, he was at the main table with the Secretary General and influential leaders, including Donald Trump.
Yes, of course. Okay, so David, the international media, they've been preoccupied for a long time with our former president, and then there was this change and there was great expectations. Do you think that the international media has been able to capture the new presidency, and what are they saying about this new order?
Well, I think, Peter, that the challenge from a media perspective, since this is a media show, so I'll put the politics aside for a second, you know, the difficulty for President Ramaphosa is to break through to the international audience. He did have a prime slot at the UNGA. He hit the notes that you would expect: the land issue, the economy, youth, unemployment, and potential of South Africa. But to break through all the other news that is around us all the time in this day and age is a challenge. He seemed like he managed to do that on the business front, as Sophie was saying, with the round table. But at the same time, given the focus on the land issue, he was presented with the challenge by the soundbite politics that we are living in now, when he said, you know, there is no killing of white farmers in South Africa. Now, there's been a lot of discussion what he meant by that, but that sort of moment does sometimes take away from maybe the strategic objective of the government, which I'm sure was to put on the platform that the land issue from their perspective is going to be managed well and will be done in a constitutional manner. So those who are watching it, who might not be really fully focused internationally on what the President of South Africa is doing at any one time, might just in the corner of the mind see that because they know something about the land issue, and not get the picture that the government at least is wanting to put forward. And any amount of kind of correction and or explanation after the fact, it's possibly a lost opportunity because of the nature of how the media sometimes focuses on the gaffe, on the mistake from their perspective, rather than on the substance of what the president might have been putting forward.
Yeah, Mokosini, your take, was it a mission successful?
I think it was a successful mission, but I think, and I agree with David to a certain extent, that South Africa is facing a huge problem in that actually the ruling party and the DA have abdicated leadership on the discussion of land to smaller parties like the EFF, which is very radical in its tone, but also you have, you know, outfits like BLF
yes.
and AfriForum, and you get this rhetoric that's laced with racial epithets, and that's worrying for people who are outside. The problem with South Africa, I've said this before, is that since 2009 we've begun to be inward looking. Before we were concerned about how people viewed us as a country, and now we are concerned about ourselves and the issues that we disagree on, and sometimes we disagree to the extent and in a way that makes other people who are not inside the country to think that there could be problems in South Africa. South Africa has the largest number of people of European descent. I think we've got about 5 million, the biggest in all of the continent. All the continent put together do not have the numbers of what. And that is a concern to people sitting in America, to people sitting in the EU. That is a concern for the presidency of Donald Trump, which is finds itself on the side of white nationalism. So I think the way we talk about the land reform program, we must talk about it in such a way that we do not end up, you know, losing the message and end up now sounding like we have a race problem in South Africa, which is not true, by the way. it could very well be that the majority of landowners are white, but the majority of white people in South Africa, they just own the land on which their homes are built and maybe where their businesses are, and they wouldn't be affected by, expropriation of land without compensation. So the use of, race when you talk about the issue, I think it does worry people inside the country and worry people outside the country. For me, it's about how we communicate this thing. And for President Ramaphosa at the United Nations and other people watching, that could be a problem in that he is not saying much that, placates people who are worried about it. Yeah.
David, final word for you on this particular issue. Yes, we're competing for sound bites and so on and so forth. But do you think that the international media understands South Africa, or even making an effort to understand South Africa, or are they also getting caught up kind of with whatever is being thrown out there?
Well, I think it all depends on which media you're speaking about. There is a very broad section of international media here. You've got the global media like CNN, who, on our side, we have both a mix of the kind of telling the African story from the point of view of the positive stories that are out there, the future of Africa. And then we have also the news side, which has a bit of that. But obviously news often focuses on the more difficult questions that are out there. I think with the Nelson Mandela centenary this year, this is an opportunity for the government, which it has been using to get a renewed focus on the country. But during the years of the previous president, there was an image that South Africa garnered, which is possibly not the image South Africans want out there in the international media. There has been a honeymoon period with Cyril Ramaphosa, the president, that the government has been able to, in some cases, latch onto and get out to the international media. Again, it's about putting your best foot forward, as it were, with the media, and knowing where your strengths are with an audience that isn't necessarily tapped in to the ins and outs. So the land issue may actually be a way, a positive way, but as you said, the middle is often missing, and it's the most extreme voices that get out there.
All right.
I think also, Peter.
All right, I'm going to ask you to pause because we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, I'm going to let you finish your point. But I want to say thanks very much to David. Thanks very much for coming through, and we will be right back after this. Don't go away.
Is he facing conspiracy? What is the nature of the corruption charges that he faces? But if it's a blatant kind of corruption case, he faces a potential 15 years in prison. And lest we forget, his father is in the dock in a few weeks' time, also facing corruption charges. So those parallels between father and son and the regime change in South Africa and what's happening with our courts at the moment will be something that is profoundly interesting, I think, to all South Africans.
Right, welcome back. You're still watching Media Monitor, and we're starting to get to the final stages of the program today, and we take a look now at what's been happening on the pages of front pages and sometimes the middle pages of the newspapers. And Sophie and Makosini join me and continue to chat about these. Let me start with you, Sophie. What grabbed your attention?
Well, the story Cyril takes ANC leaders to task. It's about what he said at the NEC yesterday. I mean, this is what Makosini was talking about. How do you ensure that there's synergy, but the message is one?
Yeah.
Now, unfortunately, currently, the ruling party is very, very divided. And you have different people saying different things, everyone trying to influence the society in terms of his or her position, defending himself or perhaps continuing to sow divisions. And that is the problem. I mean, the stories last week around what the former president was doing. I mean, the story around the fact that he was in Qatar. And then during the week, there's an announcement that United Arab Emirates has signed an agreement with the Department of Justice on issues of ensuring that they are able to bring people who have committed crime in South Africa to account. And then I'm asking myself, was the former president's visit to Qatar to aimed at perhaps negotiating a next place for people who are currently in Dubai, whom we know, who are they? And it is very, very, very disturbing in terms of what's happening within the ANC, and you're counting months before elections, and ANC is in such a difficult position,
All right. I'm going
very
to rush this a little bit because we don't have much time, but one of the stories that really sort of blew up social media this week, Makosini, was this rape of this 6-year-old child, 7-year-old child. And then there was this debate about race. Should he have been named? Should he not have been named? He's on the front pages of some of the newspapers now. He's been named. There he is, Nicholas
Nino, yeah.
And I just wonder your take on the chain of events, because I think sometimes the public don't understand the law, and then at the other, sometimes newspapers are also naughty because sometimes they do name ahead of court appearances. Your take on what happened this week?
I think there is a concern amongst some observers, and those concerns are not misplaced. The concerns are that there is sort of a subliminal view that rape belongs to one race group. You see sometimes on social media people saying this is not the behavior that you expect from a white person, because somehow we are made to believe that rape is a crime that's committed mainly by black people. So I think there was that pushback to say, but when it's black perpetrators, alleged perpetrators, you name them, you show their pictures, and here you have pictures, and when people are sharing the pictures, sort of they're told, no, don't do that, don't expose the person because he hasn't appeared in court. And I think for me, all this debate, even how Dross reacted to this, and it all takes us away from the central issue, and that is men rape. The person who raped the 6-year-old child is a man. And that's a discussion that we need to have in this country, that what is it that makes us men behave worse than animals? We kill, we rape, we do all these things. And I think that's a conversation that we need to have. And, for me, it has become a norm in South Africa that even before you have appeared in court, if the media know who you are, they'll either splash your name in the paper or splash your picture in the paper. And, I have gone through the story by Sunday Times and by City Press and Rapport. It's quite a gruesome story. Even the detail. It's really gruesome that how can a human being do this to a child? It's just really, really staggering.
Sophie, is there a way that the media should cover a story like this, or cover rape in general?
No way, rape is rape, and it must be called as such. We cannot hide the facts. We must expose the rapist. This is horrible. This is horrible. Why are we supposed to hide and defend and protect an alleged rapist? Why? This is horrible in a public space.
Yeah.
You see, I'm missing, and I agree with Sophie 100%. What I'm missing from the people who are saying, no, let's uphold the law, let's not name the guy before. To what end? What is it that you want to achieve?
Well, there's the dangers. Imagine there's an identification parade that needs to happen.
Yeah.
Once this stuff is on social media, it places the judges in a difficult situation, because now this person's face has been exposed, and it may influence an identity parade. There could be times where the name of the child could be exposed.
Peter, the DNA.
Yeah.
The DNA. We have better way of ensuring that we are able to investigate this case. It's not only about identification. What if perhaps the face of the child was covered? She can't identify this person. In other words, that person must not be found guilty because a child can't say, this is Sophie. No, we have sophisticated technology to ensure that we investigate this case. So for me, it's about what has happened, and people are trying to massage the whole story, as if it's something that needs to be protected. This is horrible. This
and it must
is
be exposed.
bad.
Okay, very briefly, Malusi Gigaba versus Ridi Hlabi. Your take on this?
I know both people. I worked with Ridi here, we were friends. I worked with Malusi Gigaba. I think both of them did not handle themselves very well. And I think our leaders and celebrities need to understand that, you know, no one emerges unscathed out of a public spat. But also in and of itself is not a bad thing that they can disagree and argue about a matter, for instance, that has got to do with the country. And I have seen that many people are criticizing Ridi for raising the issue of the child, but the counter argument is that the issue of the minister's child was reported on, albeit under different circumstances before. But I think because the minister has decided to take the matter to court, it will play itself out. They will know exactly who's wrong and who's right.
All right, but everybody loses in the end. All
Absolutely.
right, you know what? We've run out of time, as we do. Sophie Mkwena, Makosini Ngosi, thank you both very much for joining us. And for you at home, thank you so much for joining us as well. Make a date. Let's do it again at the same time next week for more of the same. This is us saying goodbye and have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.